Hello there, it's Mr. Chime from weeklybagel.com, and today I'm back again with another episode of the Weekly Bagel podcast. And today I'm just going to be talking about how to rent with a poor credit history. A while ago, I believed in episode 6 of my Weekly Bagel podcast, I was talking about the kind of credit score that apartments usually ask for before they rent out to any potential renter out there. And as a young working class adult that you are, I always recommend that before you even consider getting a place of your own, to always work on your credit. At least bring your credit score up to either the fair range or the good range, so that apartment we consider you as a possible tenant and fix everything that is in your credit history that is really bad, so that when apartments go to do their credit background check, there won't be any red flag that they will see that will make them not consider you as a potential renter with them. But does that mean that if you have a poor credit history or a bad credit, that means you can't get an apartment? Not necessarily. You can still get an apartment with a poor credit history. However, I think you have to break your back to prove to the apartment that you're a very reliable person. This is because when apartments run their background check on you, they're just looking for signs of you being somebody that doesn't really pay rent on time, somebody that skips rent due date, somebody that doesn't even pay rent at all. That's what they're looking for when they run that background check on you, especially the credit aspect. So if you're coming in with a poor credit history, you have to prove to them that you're very reliable, that you're somebody that they could trust to remit the rent every month at the agreed time. And how do you go about doing this? Well, you can rent with a low credit score. All you have to do is prove yourself to the apartment. That's one of them. And for you to be able to do that, you need a guarantor. There are guarantor companies out there that you pay to speak on your behalf. Or it's either that or you use a co-signer. This is where you take your parents with you if you're a young working class adult, or a friend or somebody that could co-sign and tell the apartment that, hey, this person's responsibility to pay rent falls on me. If the person refuses to pay rent, or if the person doesn't really stick to the apartment leasing contract, and if there's any blemishes that is going to go on the credit history, let it go on my credit history. And that's what the co-signer is there to do. Another thing you could do is you could consider getting a roommate. This is because if your credit is poor, there's a high chance that your roommate's credit score may be better than yours, right? So you could use your roommate's credit score to apply for the apartment. Besides, getting a roommate makes it easy to get the apartment, since now the apartment doesn't have to look at your credit history or run a background check on you. They could do that on your roommate. This is especially if your roommate is coming in with a fair or good credit score range. That's going to work on yours behalf. Now, I always recommend that in a situation where you don't want a roommate and you don't have anybody to co-sign for you, you can negotiate with the apartment complex. You could offer to pay higher than the usual security deposit. What does this mean? Take, for instance, if the apartment is asking for a usual security deposit of, say, $600, since you're coming in with a poor credit score, and especially if your previous rental history is good, and you haven't had any apartment with your previous apartments that you've been renting with, you can offer to pay perhaps $1,200, even $1,500 as a security deposit. Where some apartments may consider it, and some may want something more tangible than that, something more that could move them to, consider you as as a tenant. Because some apartments will be like, hey, if even if our security deposit is 600 and this guy or lady is offering $1,200 or $2,000, that doesn't mean that when she or he signs the lease and it's time to remit rent, the person is going to pay the rent. It doesn't mean that. So they need something more than that. In that situation, this is where you offer to pay a few months of rent up front. This is if you could. You could tell them, hey, you could pay down 6 months of rent. And most apartments, we have a change of mind after that, because I have actually offered this advice to somebody who tried it and it worked. But let us be realistic. Not everybody has that amount of money, right? So personally, I would recommend you work on your credit first before going to get a place of your own. But in a situation where you can't, because I know circumstances tend to change and everything is not perfect, you could offer to pay a few months of rent up front. It doesn't really have to be 6 months. You can offer to do 3 months. This is especially when it's backed by evidence of a good job and a steady paycheck coming in. Take for instance, say your pay stub is like 3 or 4 times the rent. The apartment will consider that, because most apartments out there are just trying to make money. They are a business, and their goal is to fill their apartments up with tenants that are remitting money every month. So in a situation where you could show that you have the financial capacity to remit money every month or the rent, and you are going to pay down a few months of rent, and you're trying to offer them higher than the usual security deposit, of course they will consider you. Of course they will consider you, because they are looking at your pay stub and they know that you have a consistent monthly income coming in, and they are looking at your monthly income, and your monthly income is like 3 or 4 times the rent. That tells them right there that there is no reason why you can't make rent, right? And you're offering to pay higher than this usual security deposit. That tells them that you have money. So consider doing these things if your credit score is bad. The next thing you could do is you could also get a good reference from your previous landlord. I usually like to do this one. Whenever I try to get a new apartment, I always tell the apartment that I'm going to go for to call the previous apartment and talk to them, so that the previous apartment could tell them how good of a renter I was. This is because I usually make my rent on time and I abide by the policies of the apartment. So if your previous rental history was good, you could use that for your own benefit. When you are filling out the form and the apartment is asking you a question, you could just give the contact of your previous apartment and tell them, hey, you guys call them and ask about this tenant that they used to have, and see if they can put in some good words for you, and they usually do. If you do all these things, you increase your chances of getting approved for an apartment. I know that most apartments we run, actually all apartments, especially if those are commercial apartments, they will run a credit background check on you. However, credit score is not really the determinant of whether you get an apartment or not. The determinant of whether you get an apartment or not is your ability to pay rent. So the reason why apartment run a credit background check on you is to look through your credit history to see that if you owe debt in the form of unpaid rent. So that's why they do that. So if you could prove to the apartment that you have the ability to pay rent and your income is 3 to 4 times, even if it's twice the amount of the rent, so most apartments will consider you. This is especially when you already have previous rental histories that are good and doesn't have any drama in them. They will consider renting out to you, and you don't really have to worry about going in there with a low credit score. Now, can an apartment rent the apartment to you without credit at all? Say you just turned 18 and you're about to move out of your parents' house, and you got a good job. Well, they will rent an apartment to you without credit history whatsoever. However, they are going to ask for a higher than the usual deposit, and they're going to make sure that you meet most of their requirements, such as your income being 2 to 3 times the rent, and you have worked in your current job for at least 6 months. So whether you have a bad credit or you don't have any credit at all, you can still get a home of your own, an apartment of your own, if you are proving to the apartment that you have the financial ability to pay the rent, which offsets your bad or lack of credit history. Now, what is the lowest credit score a landlord will accept? Say you're coming in with a bad credit score and your credit history is bad. What is the lowest credit score an apartment complex will accept? Well, it depends. Like I previously mentioned, when apartments are running their credit check on you, they are looking for unpaid debts. They are looking for a history of skipped rental payments. And that tells them right there whether you're going to be a reliable tenant or not. And if you're coming in with a bad credit, but you have good rental history, it doesn't matter what your credit score is, as long as you have the ability or you have proof to show that you could pay rent. So there's not really a lowest credit score a landlord will accept or an apartment will accept. But however, apartments will usually give consideration to people who have fair and good credit scores. This is especially when they also have good rental histories. And the reason why this is so is because you're not the only person applying. So for a particular apartment unit, there may be tens of people applying, and out of those tens of people, a majority or may be within the fair or the good credit score. So if you are the only person there with no credit history or a bad credit history, they are going to pick the ones that have good credit history or fair credit history and a good job before they go for you. It does not mean that they don't accept people with poor credit history. You understand? So if you're going out there and you're getting rejected, don't panic. It does not mean you can never get an apartment with a poor credit history. You just need to show the apartment that you can pay your rent and that your previous rental experience was good by using the previous landlord as a good reference, and printing out 6 months of pay stubs to take it to them and show them, hey, listen, you got the money, you got the job, you have a consistent income flow that you could afford to remit rent to them every month. And if all else fails, then go for a roommate, especially someone that has a good credit history and a good job. And you could use that roommate's good credit to get the apartment for you too. That's all I've got to say to you today. If you're going out there trying to get a place of your own, I usually recommend young working class adults to work on their credit first before going out there to apply for an apartment. But obviously, circumstances cannot always be perfect. You might want a mental break from your parents or from your roommate, and you're trying to get a place of your own. In that situation, if your credit history is bad or you have a poor credit score, you can still attempt to get a place of your own if you do everything that I have talked about here. That's all I've got to say to you. Next week, I am going to be releasing another episode. And good luck with your apartment hunting.